totally false story.
Honourable Member for Esquimalt, Saanich, Sooke.
Mr. Speaker, while the repeated use of chemical weapons by Syrian government forces is unquestionably a war crime, the airstrikes last week were not only contrary to international law, but similar strikes last year failed to end the use of chemical weapons on Syrian civilians. The government has clearly expressed their support for these airstrikes, but there's no evidence of any plan for what's next or any diplomatic efforts to try and end this crisis. Mr. Speaker, where's Canada in pushing for an international solution to the Syrian crisis?
The Secretary to the Minister of Foreign Affairs.
Mr. Speaker, we have been clear in our condemnation of the use of chemical weapons against people in eastern Ghouta, and we've been working hard with international allies to pursue accountability for what are war crimes. This includes $9 million for the verification, investigation, and fact-finding activities of the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons and the UN, and we are also providing over $290 million to support NGOs, UN partners, and the Red Cross to deliver life-saving assistance in Syria. Mr. Speaker, the murderous Assad regime must end the deliberate targeting of civilians.
The
Honourable Member for Laurier-Sainte-Marie. It's not just chemical weapons that are being used by Assad against civilians, against his own people, Mr. Speaker. There are attacks, other attacks, forced disappearances, torture, famine as a tactic for war, and I've just listed a few. Will the government contribute to diplomatic efforts to put an end to this horrible suffering by the Syrian people, take the authors of these crimes to hold them to account, and increase humanitarian assistance? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Mr. Speaker, we are clear in our condemnation of the use of chemical weapons in eastern Ghouta, as well as all violence against Syrians. Canada continues to work with its international allies to hold the authors of these crimes accountable. That includes $9 million for verification, investigation, and fact-finding missions, among others. Let's be clear, Mr. Speaker, that the murderous Assad regime must put an end to this deliberate targeting of its own people.